Today we are making half square triangles, and I'm so excited to have you here. So you are going to have to help me decide which to do. All right, my friends, I have an entire stack of leftover blocks from a whole bunch of different charm packs, 5-inch charm packs. So we are going to start using these up. These have probably been collecting for the last 3 or 4 years easily, and it is time to go through them and use them. I like picking these up when I find them on clearance. So that's why they're a whole bunch of mishmash, doesn't match much. And we've selected this fabric to go with it because I think it's going to be pretty nice blendables to work with it. There's a lot of pinks in here. So I think this is going to be the perfect color. So what do I need? Well, I am going to be using my 5-inch ruler by 24 inches, 5-inch by 24 inch. And I'm going to be using my rotary cutter. So I love my rotary cutters, and they make quick work of any quilting or sewing project that you need to cut straight edges out of. So we're going to be using this and cutting up our 5-inch fabric. Now I'm going to line up my ruler right on the edge, right on my 5 inches, make sure my sides are matching. And then I'm going to help with a weight. You know how I always say pens are an extra hand? Well, my weights are an extra hand. So I'm going to hold it, making sure my fingers are back at least a ½ inch, in this case over an inch, from the edge. I'm going to open my rotary blade. I'm going to make my 5-inch strip, and I'm going to close my rotary blade before I lay it down. So very important. Then we simply take our 5-inch. We're going to be making a bunch of these. So we're going to move our fabric back down, line it up, and make some more 5-inch strips. So I'm going to do that. I will meet you at the iron because there are some wrinkles in this. If they get to be too many and I can't flatten them out to cut them, we'll be pressing them before I cut them. All right, and we're using the hot cotton setting because we're using hot cotton fabric, and we're making sure all of our wrinkles are out of the fabric before we continue to cut our fabrics into the 5-inch squares. Never trust a fold, always press it first. And trim all of your strips into 5-inch squares, and we're going to keep this excess little bit of scraps. I've got a really exciting project coming up that I want to show you how to use all of these tiny little throwaway pieces. We're going to put them to good use. Right, we are making a half square triangle quilt. So we're going to make an entire quilt top of half square triangles, and then we're going to put sashing or borders around the side. So we've got our leftover pieces from lots of different charm packs, and even some that we've cut up from previous quilts. And I've got what I'm using as my solid is kind of a beautiful floral or branch-like in the purple, which I kind of thought went with everything. But since I have such rich and bold colors mixed in, it's not going to be all pale. So I chose that. I have my threads. I think I'm going to go get my lighter purple to go with this. But these are essential threads from Connecting Threads. I love them. They are cotton threads. They work beautiful in my machine. I'm going to wind a bunch of bobbins for them before I get started. And I need pens to make my half square triangles. So I have lots of excess pens. I like the 1 3/4 inch glass head. They look like plastic, but these are glass, my friends. And they're 1 3/4 inch, so they're not too big, they're not too small, they're the perfect size for what we're doing. And then I need a pen to write on my fabric. So we can get any kind of fabric marking pen, but on this project, the only line we make on our fabric is our cutting line on the back of the fabric. So I can use my Sharpie, but you want to make sure that you're using an ultra fine point, because any kind of these permanent markers have a habit of bleeding just a little bit on fabric if you mustn't fuss and play with them a little bit too much. So the ultra fine point works perfect for fabric. And then of course I need my fabric scissors, but I'm going to go back to the cutting board to use the rotary on most of these, but I do need my straight edge. So you can use any ruler that you want. This one is a 12 inch, but it has my point on it. So I can use this for a lot of different functional pieces. And you want a ruler that's long enough to go all the way across point to point on your fabric. So let's get started. So I'll show you what I am talking about. We're going to take each of these blocks before we start sewing, and we're going to lay them out on the table. We're going to place them perfectly on top of one another. Now, again, you have the bumps. Usually on the bumps, by rules, they say that these are cut right at halfway in between the point is going to be your 5 inch by 5 inch square. You're going to notice, depending upon who cuts these, where cuts these, they're slightly off of that. But as you can see, this perfectly cut 5 inch is going to be just perfect for this. So I am going to take my ruler. When I have it laid on the table, I'm going to go point to point. Can you see my points? Oh boy, sorry. Point to point. And I'm going to draw my line. Now, I've opted to use this one because we're cutting on the line. Again, it doesn't matter. If you're more comfortable with a pencil, you're more comfortable with a darker chalk, whatever you want to. I didn't need to have it that dark. I just need to see it. And then we're going to do that for every single one of these. And each one, we're going to take. Did I tell you that this is a magnet? I love these because they hold my pens there, and I can just get anywhere near it and drop it, and it's going to stay on my magnet. So these are relatively cheap. So please take advantage of these. And I am telling you some of the products that I use and I love. So I'm going to link some of these in my video. They are affiliate links, which means I may earn a small commission at no extra cost to you. And as an Amazon associate, I earn from qualifying purchases. So this helps support my channel and allows me to continue to bring you this beautiful fabric and crafting, creating content. I always like to quilt with a pen and pad of paper close because I like to do my calculations and my figuring out. So when I'm looking at making a quilt and I'm using 5 inch blocks. So a finished block is 4.5 inches approximately. I'm going to need 50, or I'm going to be able to get 56 5-inch squares out of 1 yard of fabric if that yardage is the average yardage of 36 by 42. And if I'm using fat quarters, I can get 12 5-inch squares from a fat quarter and put the remaining into scraps where I can make the 3-inch, the 4-inch square blocks if I choose to. Now, what do I need to make a quilt, and how big of a quilt am I going to make? Well, if I want a throw quilt or a lap quilt, I'm going to need about 180 5-inch squares to make this quilt. If I'm making it for a twin size bed, I'm going to need about 320 5-inch squares. And if I'm making a queen size quilt, likewise, if a king, I'm going to need more, but I'll need about 400 5-inch squares. So charm packs usually have 42 pieces. I can get a lot of my blocks from leftover fabric that I have. So I can be cutting out of yardage for my solids, or for which piece goes with everything, I can cut out of yardage. These other blocks, I can use my charm packs or cut up 5-inch squares, go through my scrap bag, anything that's 5 inches, I can do that. But with charm packs usually having 42 pieces, I am going to need about 10 charm packs to make a queen or king size or larger quilt. So again, you're going to save money if you have the scraps to cut up or the existing charm pack leftovers. So keep those. Those are a gold mine. And let's get started. I have done a small stack with my lines using my rulers and my pens, so I can put this under the sewing machine, just pick it up one at a time. I've got right sides together, wrong sides facing out, and we're going to just start sewing these. And I've got a bunch others laid out ready to do my mark and my pens. So I've got a lot of them matched. Let's go ahead and start sewing. And we are lining up our marked line with the tip of the foot. And we're sewing a 1/4 inch or a scant 1/4 inch on either side of that line. Remember that center line is our cut line. And once I have these through, I'm going to turn them around and we'll sew a 1/4 inch line on the opposite side. So this way I'm chain stitching. I'm getting a lot done at one time. I'm following my marked line. And I do recommend you use pens, because if you use pens, you're going to be that much more accurate. And your lines are going to be straight. And we're just following our drawn line with the tip of the foot. And that's how I measure my 1/4 inch on either side of my center line. Okay, now when you have a good pile of these done, pull out your little scissors or your snips, and we are going to go through these, and we're going to trim them one from another and stack them in a very flat, straight pile. And it's going to take you just a minute to get that accomplished. And then we'll bring them over to the iron to help press or set those stitches. And then back to the cutting board. And just keep stacking them into a nice, neat pile. And I have my sew line on one side. I'm just going to turn the whole stack around, and I'm going to start lining it up and sewing on the opposite side. All of my blocks are still in a chain stitch pattern, so they're all hooked together. So I'm just going to go right back the opposite direction using my written line in the center to be my guide, and stitching 1/4 inch by lining up the point of this and sewing right down the center of that black line. chain stitch one direction, I'm turning it around and chain stitching the opposite direction. And I need you to go as slow as you need to go to be as accurate as you can be. We want to line up that point right on that center mark line that we've marked. And we're going to sew them one after another. If you kind of drop them in your lap, they'll work a little bit better, going a little bit straighter. And now we're taking our blocks that we've chain stitched together, and I'm just trimming them up. We've got our center drawn line. We've got our sewn line on either side of that 1/4 inch. And now we're going to take them all apart. See what little thread is wasted when you chain stitch. So that's a wonderful thing. I don't have to worry about, it just makes it all go faster. Makes it go so much faster. Just one cut, and I'm cutting off of the 2 sewn lines. As you can see, I've got 2 threads. So chain stitching really just makes quick work of this. And I'm just going to pull them together, stack them together, and then we will meet at the ironing machine where I'm going to lock in my stitches by having it on the cotton setting and the steam. And what does lock in your stitches mean? Well, I don't know the definition by the dictionary, but locking in the stitches means that I'm putting the hot iron on top of them, and it's kind of making those stitches, instead of being able to feel them, it locks it into the fabric more, makes it kind of one with the fabric and stay in place. Not to mention, well, it's just fun to work with quilt blocks that are smooth and freshly pressed. Okay, meet you at the iron in a moment. All right, so we have one absolutely incredible, yummy, yummy, yummy bundle done, but this is not enough for a quilt. So I am going to go into fast speed, and I'm going to take my 2 pieces right sides together. I'm going to put the point of this right at the point of this foot, as if I had the line drawn across here, and I'm going to stitch. Now, once you've made over 500 fabric bowls where you make big old X's in your fabric, or you've made 3 or 4 of these half square triangle quilts, then maybe you can do this. But if you can't, and I will tell you, some extremely, extremely qualified national teachers still have trouble without making the lines on the fabric, following the line with a point of the foot. Because if your foot is off, your tension is off, you're using a different machine, if your fingers aren't there, or if you're distracted at all, it's easy to get offline. So that's why I always recommend putting your mark, putting your pens, because that way you have a place where that point of that foot can flow all the way across. If you don't have that line to follow, you are using the point of this, you're making an imaginary line, and you're using your fingers to keep it directly on point, light enough so you're not stretching the fabric, but solid enough to where that fabric is going straight. And I will tell you, my friends, if you are doing this and your line does wobble, what I do is I take that, I pull it in my reject pile, and yes, accidents happen. I've got a reject pile where I started and it has done this, and I did one right in the center of it and another one where it started to bulk up. So I'm going to take my seam ripper in front of the television tonight with the family, and I'm going to undo those with the seam ripper. But for these blocks, again, I do recommend the line. If you're experienced and confident, you can try it without the line, but sometimes you don't know how straight or curvy. Look at this one, how curvy this one is. And again, that's pretty perfect, but again, it's a little out of whack. It's easy to get that way. So when you go over to your cutting table, if it is not perfect, I do have a reject pile. I'm not throwing anything away. I might just save it for a scrappy project, but that means you have to have more supplies on hand if you're going to reject one than you would if you draw your line, put your pins in the fabric, and be perfect and slow and pay attention to what you're doing. Just some thoughts. So how do you feel about half square triangles? Well, my friends, we've taken all of these scrappy pieces, matched them together with the same solid color, and now we're going to make them into a half square triangle quilt. We have our iron on the hot setting, and all I'm going to do is set these stitches. So I am going to take these one at a time, and we're going to press it, set the stitches, grab the next. I am on the cotton setting with water in there for steam. And we're just going to stack 4 or 5 of these, setting in those stitches. Then we'll go over to the cutting board, and we're going to cut right in between my lines and create our half square triangles. And then we'll come back here to the ironing board and press them open. So every one that I'm throwing down here actually turns into 2 different blocks, with this color as half of it and the opposite color. Of course, they're right sides together, so. And I'm going to finish these up, and I will meet you at the cutting board. And it's time to take our stack over to the cutting board. And one at a time, my friends, we are going to take one of our blocks, put our ruler right on our center line, and we are going to cut it. And then I'm just going to take 2 separate stacks out of the blocks. So I have them all facing the same direction. And we have a few of these to go through, don't we? Looks like I've got some wavy lines there. I think I got to go back to the sewing machine and straighten that out. But we're going to go through quality control in just a moment and get that done. And we are going to go through this stack, cut them in half, and again, we're putting them into 2 separate stacks, so I have them easy to go to the ironing board, all facing the same direction. As you've noticed, I've always kept the same fabric face up, so that I will be all lined up. So now we have 2 stacks of triangles. It is time to take these lovely things over to the ironing board and press them open. If I could sing, my friends, I would be singing now. These are my lovely stacks of half square triangles, and it is time to take them over to the ironing board and press them open. All right, so I have my iron on the cotton setting with steam in it, and I have my 2 stacks of half square triangles. I'm going to turn these over, face them point towards me, and that way when I pull them off, I can quickly press them. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means, whoopsie, that means I want to take my point of my triangle. I want to lift it up, so I'm squeezing it with my 2 fingers to lift it up, laying that part down and going backwards. Now, what does that mean? What does that do? Well, when I do it this way, that means the back of the seam is going towards the color part. So that means on every single one of these triangles, my seams are always going to align towards the colored piece that I'm putting with it. And then we'll set that aside, grab the next one, and do the same. And I can do probably 3 of these in a stack before I need to move that stack out of my way to have a flat surface to continue to do more. Or in this case, 4. How's that? No biggie. And every one of those, the seam is going towards the block that I'm putting on them. So we're going to keep doing that for all of these blocks. I'll probably take a break or 2 in between, walk around, and that way I'm not getting too tired of doing my half square triangles. But my friends, if you do them this way, you can see how fast they actually go. So it's not like a lot of work. And of course, you won't be contending with a camera in your way while you do your half square triangles. So I hope this shows you that it's easy to do half square triangles and it is fun. Half square triangle quilts can come out to be a million different patterns, which I cannot wait to show you these, because the next step, my friends, on my bed, I am turning my, well, in my spare bedroom, I am turning my quilt on the bed upside down, and with it upside down, I have a solid green or solid like green on the back. Yes, it's still my Christmas quilt. But we are going to be laying these out on the Christmas quilt and deciding if we can create a pattern. And you can create a pattern with these even though they're scrappy, because the one side you have used are all the same on every single one. So yes, we can make a pattern. I'm so excited about that, and we're going to go do that momentarily. Yay! And after we have our blocks pressed, I've got several stacks of these, we're going to bring them over to the cutting board. And on the cutting board, I'm going to be using my 6.5 inch ruler because it's small, it's easy to use. This one is an OmniGrid. Now there's lots of different rulers that you can use. I like the heft of this, the weight of this. I like the yellow marks. Some people don't like the yellow marks. So it doesn't matter if you have a different ruler, as long as you have a small ruler that's at least the 5-inch ruler. This one's a 6.5. It does have the straight line across it. You will need that. And we're going to use that straight line, and we're going to line that straight line up with our block. Now, on our block, we are going to trim all of our blocks down to 4.5 inches. So what do we want to do? We want to make sure our line is straight. We want to make sure it's at least 4.5 inches on this side before we trim anything off. If our blocks, for whatever reason, come out less than 4.5 inches, we're going to take that block, which this one is a good block, but we would take that and put it in a different pile for our scraps, or to undo the seams if we needed that block and make it a little bit tighter. So let's go ahead and start trimming our blocks. And for this exercise, you need a healable, self-healing mat. That's the right size. A self-healing mat. You need a small square ruler with a line right through the center so you can line it up. And you need a rotary cutter that is sharp. All right, let's get started. Okay, so we have laid out all of our quilt blocks, and yes, I jumped the gun. I still have to trim them, most of them, into my 4.5 inches, but we've laid it out, and we have 12 rows across by 16 rows down. So I haven't done the math, but that's by 4.5 inches. So now this is one pattern that we can use. So think about this pattern, my friends. Think about this pattern, because we're going to give you another option. So this is option 1. And now we're going with option 2, the same blocks in the same area, just flipped over. We still have 12 rows by 16 rows, and it's flipped over. Of course, nothing's sewn together because we have to figure out the choices. So this is choice number 2. And my friends, because this is a biggie and this could be done so many different ways, I think this video is going to be so far plus the decision. And then based on what you tell me, I am going to finish the quilt and have it out, hopefully edited and out within 3 days of your bulk of your answers. So this is number 2. Do you like number 1 or number 2? Number 3, my friends, we now have it laid out, same 12 across, 16 down. We've turned all the exact same blocks around and made a different pattern, just laying out the pieces. Nothing is sewn, and I need to know which pattern you think is best. Again, this is a scrappy quilt. So if we take a look at it, you can see that we've built a block with these and a block with these. So the purples all have a block. The scrappy all have a block. So this is number 3. I need to know your thoughts on this pattern for number 3. Do we like number 1, number 2, or this one, number 3? Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Great scrappy day. I need to know your answer. Let me know.